It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a moment of laughter and relief in a world that rarely offered either. 19-year-old Isabel Morales had spent weeks planning the fundraiser at St. Mark's Church, a small, warm space that had become a second home for so many in her immigrant community. The night was alive with music and laughter, the air thick with the comforting scent of tamales and cinnamon-sweet horchata. Kids ran through the aisles, their laughter echoing off the stained glass windows, while neighbors shared stories over steaming plates of pozole. For Isabel, it was a chance to give back. A chance to show that even when the world outside felt dangerous and cold, they could still build something beautiful, something that felt like family. But just as the raffle tickets were being drawn, just as Isabel felt like maybe, just maybe, they were safe, the door swung open. A white male cop walked in and everything changed. Hi! Welcome to Life Stories by Ria, where the untold stories come to life. Every day, we share thrilling stories and struggles that many have faced, expose the raw realities of life, with twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Prepare to be captivated because these stories are far from ordinary. If you are new here, please click on the subscribe button and turn on notification because every click from you helps us keep bringing thrilling stories, raw truths, and voices that matter to your screen. Stay with us because things are about to take a turn you won't believe. Tell us, what would you do if the place you thought was safe suddenly wasn't? If your friend's life was on the line, how far would you go to make your voice heard? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This story is one you'll never forget. Now back to the story. The Fellowship Hall of St. Mark's Church had never felt so alive. Long tables were lined with mismatched tablecloths, each one borrowed from a neighbor or dug out of someone's closet. Colorful papal picado hung from the ceiling, fluttering with every laugh and every passing breeze. Isabel Morales moved between the tables like a small sunbeam, her smile wide, her eyes bright. She'd spent the last 2 weeks organizing every detail. The raffle, the silent auction, the homemade flan that had already disappeared in record time. She wore her favorite white blouse, the one with tiny embroidered flowers at the collar, a gift from her mother before she left Mexico. It made her feel close to home, even in this unfamiliar place that sometimes felt too big, too cold. Her best friend, Lupe, was helping stack the used plates when she caught Isabel's eye. "Girl, you did it," she said, grinning. "Look at this place packed." Isabel laughed, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "Yeah, but let's see if we actually made any money." They both turned to the makeshift donation table, where a battered shoebox sat half full of crumpled bills and coins. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was hope, wrapped in small bills and the promise of community. Father Ortiz stepped to the front, his warm voice filling the room. "Thank you all for coming tonight. This is what it means to be a family. When one of us struggles, we all stand together." Applause echoed through the hall. Isabel felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She thought of her mother, thousands of miles away, and of the sacrifices that had brought her here. She thought of her brother, still too young to understand the cost of leaving home. As Father Ortiz continued his blessing, the doors at the back of the hall creaked open. A hush fell as a uniformed officer stepped inside. His boots clacked on the tile, heavy and certain. His gaze swept the room, landing on Isabel. She felt her heart drop into her stomach. "Isabel Morales?" he called, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. She stood frozen, a plate of half-eaten tres leches cake in her hand. "Yes, please come with me." Confusion spread through the room like spilled ink. Lupe dropped the stack of plates, the crash echoing off the walls. "Is there a problem, officer?" Father Ortiz asked, his voice steady but laced with worry. The officer's jaw tightened. "We received information about an individual at this event who may be in violation of immigration law. Miss Morales, please come with me." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Isabel's knees went weak. She'd spent her whole life avoiding scenes like this, keeping her head down, following every rule, praying she'd never be the girl in the headline. I don't understand," she stammered. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Step over here," the officer ordered, his hand resting on his belt. Lupe grabbed Isabel's hand. She's a student. She's on the honor roll. She's never even had a parking ticket. The officer ignored her. Miss Morales, if you don't come voluntarily, I will have to place you under arrest. Isabel's breath came in shallow, painful gasps. She could feel every eye in the room on her. Parents who'd known her since she was little. Kids she'd tutored in English. Even Father Ortiz, his face lined with worry. I'll come, she whispered. Lupe's grip tightened. No, this is wrong. She's done nothing. But the officer was already reaching for the handcuffs. The sound of the metal closing around Isabel's wrists was louder than the music, louder than the laughter that had filled the hall moments before. She closed her eyes as tears spilled down her cheeks. She thought of her mother's voice, soft and trembling on the phone. Mija, be careful. Not everyone sees us the same way. The officer turned, guiding Isabel toward the door. The room was silent, except for the soft sobs of Lupe and the shocked whispers of neighbors. Please, Isabel said, her voice cracking. Please tell my brother I love him. Father Ortiz stepped forward, his eyes blazing. This is a church. She's our family. You can't just take her like this. The officer paused, his face hard. I have my orders. The door slammed shut behind them. Outside, the air was sharp with the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of traffic. The patrol car waited, its engine idling. As Isabel was guided into the back seat, she looked back at the stained glass windows of the church, the place she'd thought was safe. But there was no safety anymore. Not for her. Not for any of them. Inside, Lupe's voice rose like a battle cry. We're not letting this happen. Not without a fight. And so it began. The night air clung to Isabel Morales like a second skin as the patrol car door slammed shut. The hard plastic seat felt cold even through the thin cotton of her jeans. Her hands, now cuffed in front of her, trembled with a mix of fear and disbelief. She tried to steady her breathing, but every inhale felt like it snagged on a knot of panic. Through the tinted window, she watched as Father Ortiz tried to reason with the officer. His arms raised in a quiet plea. The officer didn't even look at him. His face was stone, his eyes hard. He just shook his head, muttering something under his breath before climbing into the front seat. The car rumbled to life, its engine louder than the chatter of the crowd that had gathered. The people Isabel had grown up with, the same ones who had clapped for her speech just an hour before, stood in clusters of disbelief and anger. Some had their phones out, recording every second. Others just stood with their hands over their mouths, eyes wide, as if by witnessing they could somehow make it stop. Lupe stood closest to the car, her face pale but determined. She mouthed something through the glass. I'm not giving up on you. Isabel nodded, though she couldn't hear the words, feeling the heat of tears finally spill over her cheeks. The officer shifted the car into gear, and they pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the laughter, the music, and the hope of the night. Everything that had felt safe now looked like a trap. The drive to the station was a blur of headlights and passing shadows. Isabel tried to steady her thoughts, but all she could hear was the echo of the officer's words. We received information about an individual at this event who may be in violation of immigration law. She wanted to scream that she wasn't a criminal, that she'd worked so hard to prove she belonged. But the words wouldn't come. They stuck in her throat like shards of glass. She thought of her mother, of the phone calls late at night when money was tight and the world felt too heavy. Mija, just keep your head down. Work hard. They'll see you're one of the good ones. Isabel had believed her. She'd believed in the system that promised a fair shot to those who played by the rules. But here she was, handcuffed in the back of a squad car for the crime of being herself. At the station, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in an unforgiving glow. The officer led her through a series of metal doors and down a hallway that smelled of sweat and bleach. Every step felt like a descent into something she couldn't yet name. They booked her like she was a criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, confiscated belongings placed in a brown paper bag with her name scrawled in black marker. She felt like she was floating outside her body, watching it happen to someone else. Isabel Morales, age 19. Suspected immigration violation. The booking officer droned, typing with mechanical precision. She tried to find her voice. Please, I'm a student. I've never. Ma'am, save it for your lawyer. He interrupted, not looking up. The tears came then, unstoppable, hot and bitter. She wondered if they'd call her mother. She wondered if her little brother would find out on the news. She wondered if the life she'd worked so hard to build was already gone. They led her to a holding cell. A cramped, cold space with a steel bench bolted to the floor. She sat, knees pressed together, arms crossed over her chest like she could hold herself together. The walls felt too close. Every sound, every cough, every clank of keys made her flinch. Hours passed. She couldn't tell how many. The clock on the wall had no hands. At some point, the door opened and a young man in a rumpled suit entered. He looked about 25, his tie askew, eyes tired. Isabel? He asked, his voice gentle. She nodded. My name is Miguel Estrada. I'm a volunteer with the Immigrant Rights Project. Your friend Lupe called us. Relief surged through her, almost making her dizzy. Please, she whispered. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm here legally, I have a DACA permit. I'm a college student. I'm not. Miguel held up a hand. I know. I've seen this before. Sometimes, even with DACA, local officers don't understand or don't care. They see an opportunity to score points. But we're going to fight this, okay? You're not alone. She nodded, tears streaming. What happens now? He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. We're filing an emergency stay. That'll pause any deportation order until we can review your case. But we need evidence. We need to show them who you are, what you've done. Letters from your professors, proof of your enrollment, your volunteer work. Everything. Isabel swallowed hard. Can you call Father Ortiz? He has everything. My teachers. He nodded. Already on it. Your community is fighting for you. But you need to be strong. They're going to try to process you fast. We need to buy time. She took a shaky breath. Okay. He leaned forward, his voice low. Isabel, this isn't just about you anymore. People are paying attention. This could change everything. His words lit a spark inside her. Even his fear gnawed at the edges. I don't want to be a headline, she whispered. I just want to go home. Miguel's eyes softened. Sometimes the fight chooses you. And sometimes, being the headline is what it takes to make them see. She nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling like a stone in her chest. He stood. I'll be back with updates. Stay strong. He gave her hand a squeeze and then he was gone, leaving her alone with the hum of the overhead light and the quiet roar of her own thoughts. In the hours that followed, Isabel replayed the night at the church over and over in her mind. The laughter, the music, the moment the door opened. Every detail felt sharper now. She wondered how many other nights had ended like this for someone else. How many families had been torn apart under the same harsh lights. A guard opened the door, her keys jangling like tiny shackles. Morales, she barked. Phone call. Isabel's heart leapt. My mother? She asked, her voice hopeful. The guard shrugged. Says she's a reporter. A reporter? Isabel's stomach flipped. She followed the guard down the hall to a phone mounted on the wall. The receiver was cold against her ear. Hello? She said, voice trembling. Isabel? This is Anita Vasquez from the Atlanta Times. I'm following your case. I want to help share your story. Her mind spun. My story? Yes, Anita said. People need to understand what's happening. What this means for all of us. Can I talk to you? Isabel hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to wait for her lawyer, to protect herself. But Miguel's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the fight chooses you. Okay, she whispered. Let's talk. The guard tapped her watch impatiently. Isabel closed her eyes, drew a steadying breath, and began. Tell them, she said, her voice trembling but strong. Tell them I'm not the only one. Tell them we matter. Tell them we're not giving up. And as she spoke, As her words reached the ears of a world that had too long ignored voices like hers, a movement was born, one that would not be silenced. Anita Vasquez hung up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she placed the receiver back in its cradle. She'd spoken to dozens of people in her time as a reporter, some with stories that had changed laws, some that had changed hearts. But there was something about Isabel Morales that felt different, like the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Anita had always prided herself on her instincts, and every one of them was screaming that this was more than a local arrest. This was a spark, and the world was dry kindling. She grabbed her notepad and began to scribble furiously. Words spilled across the page like a flood. Community fundraiser, church sanctuary, DACA student, wrongful arrest, deportation threat. Each phrase felt like a puzzle piece, and she was determined to put them together. Her editor at the Atlanta Times, Charles Grant, wasn't known for patience, but he'd always trusted Anita's gut. She dialed his number, tapping her foot as the line rang. "Vasquez?" Charles barked, his voice as gruff as ever. "Charlie, it's me. I've got something big." Anita began, her words tumbling out. "Slow down," he said, but she could hear the interest in his voice. "Tell me." Anita took a breath. "It's about Isabel Morales, 19 years old, DACA recipient, college student. She was arrested during a community fundraiser at St. Mark's Church, an event she organized. For God's sake. They're threatening her with deportation." A pause. Then, "That's a local ICE matter, Anita. We've covered these before." "No," she cut in, her voice sharp. "This isn't just about Isabel. It's about the entire system. It's about a community that feels hunted even in the places they thought were safe. This is the story that shows what's happening to immigrant families in America right now. And it's not going away quietly." Charles was silent for a moment. Then he exhaled. "You think it's worth front-page material?" "It's more than that," she said. "It's worth our best. If we do this right, people will see what's really happening. And maybe, just maybe, we can change something." She could almost hear him nodding. "Okay," he said finally. "Your lead on this. But Anita, get it right, and be safe. We both know how ugly these stories can get." "Understood," she said, hanging up. She grabbed her camera bag and her laptop, her mind already racing. She needed to get to Isabel's college. She needed to talk to her professors, her classmates, the people who knew her as more than a headline. She needed to build a story that no one could ignore. At the same time, back in the detention center, Isabel sat in the cold gray room that felt more like a box than a cell. The walls pressed in on her from all sides. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead never seemed to stop. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the warmth of the church that night. The smell of tamales, the laughter of children. She clung to that memory like a lifeline. Suddenly, the door rattled and swung open. Miguel Estrada entered, carrying a battered briefcase and a small stack of papers. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were fierce. "Isabel," he said, pulling up a metal chair. "I have some news." She sat up straighter, hope blooming in her chest. "Good news." He hesitated. "Some of it. And some of it complicated." "Tell me," she said, bracing herself. He took a deep breath. "First, the good news. We've got your DACA paperwork in order. Father Ortiz, Lupe, and your professors have written affidavits confirming your status and your contributions to the community. That will help. And Anita Vasquez, she's already talking to people. She's building a case for you in the court of public opinion." Isabel nodded, relief flooding her. That's something. "But," he continued, "there's also this." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Isabel unfolded it, her hands trembling. It was a deportation notice, signed by a local ICE official. Her name was scrawled at the top, followed by the words, "Order of removal effective immediately." She felt the blood drain from her face. "Effective immediately?" she whispered. Miguel's jaw tightened. "They're pushing this through fast, Isabel. They want you out before the media catches up. It's a tactic. Get rid of you before people can rally around you. Tears stung her eyes. But I've done everything right. I followed every rule. I've worked so hard. I know, he said, his voice softening. I know you have. That's why we're not going to let them do this. I'm filing an emergency motion for a stay of removal. It'll buy us some time, but it's going to take a fight. And I need you with me every step of the way. She took a deep breath, forcing the panic back. Okay, I'm with you. Good, he said, standing. I'll keep you updated. And Isabel? She looked up. You're stronger than you think. Don't let them convince you otherwise. She nodded, blinking back tears. I won't. As Miguel left, Isabel sat in the silence of the cell, staring at the piece of paper that threatened to end everything she'd built. She thought of her mother, of her little brother, of the promise she'd made to herself to make something of her life. And in that moment, something hardened inside her. She wasn't going to let them erase her. Anita arrived at the college campus just as the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in hues of pink and orange, but she barely noticed. Her focus was on the task at hand. She found her way to the student center, a modern building with glass walls and bright murals, and began asking questions. It didn't take long before she was led to Professor Stevens, Isabel's history instructor. He was a tall, thin man with a mop of unruly hair and a passion for civil rights that practically radiated from his skin. When Anita explained why she was there, he didn't hesitate. Isabel Morales? He said, his voice trembling with anger. That girl is one of the brightest, kindest students I've ever had. She volunteers. She tutors younger kids. She's never once given me a moment's worry. And now they're treating her like she's a criminal. Anita nodded, scribbling notes. Can you tell me more about her character? Her work. He leaned forward, his eyes blazing. She wrote a paper last semester about the history of immigration law in the U.S. It was so good I had it published in the campus journal. She's passionate about justice. She's the kind of student who makes me believe there's hope for this country. Anita's heart pounded. Would you be willing to speak on record? Absolutely, he said. This is wrong, and people need to know. Meanwhile, word was spreading on social media. Lupe had posted a short video from outside the detention center. Her voice cracked as she spoke. They're trying to deport Isabel Morales, a 19-year-old college student who's done nothing but give back to her community. We need your help. Share the story. Call your representatives. Don't let them erase her. Within hours, the video had thousands of views. Comments poured in, some supportive, some hateful. But one thing was clear. People were paying attention. Back in her cell, Isabel closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the center. The distant clang of doors. The hushed voices of guards. The echo of her own breath. She remembered what Anita had asked her. Why do you think they're doing this? And she'd answered with a voice that felt like it belonged to someone else. Because they can. Because they think no one will care. But now, even as fear gripped her heart, she felt a flicker of something else. Hope. Because people were beginning to care. Her story was no longer just hers. It was everyone's. And as she drifted into a restless sleep, she vowed that no matter what happened next, she wouldn't let them silence her. Isabel Morales didn't sleep that night. The detention center's concrete walls felt colder than usual, the cot beneath her harder. Every time she closed her eyes, the deportation notice flashed behind her eyelids like a warning she couldn't escape. She thought of all the small, quiet moments she'd taken for granted. Walking to class with her best friend Jasmine, studying late into the night with a cup of chamomile tea, the hush of the library where she lost herself in books about social justice. Those moments seemed impossibly distant now, like relics from another life. But outside, beyond those walls, the world was stirring. Anita Vasquez sat at her kitchen table, her laptop glowing in the darkness. Her coffee had long gone cold, but she barely noticed. The clock on the stove read 2:12 a.m., but adrenaline kept her awake. She scrolled through dozens of messages flooding her inbox. Students, teachers, neighbors, even strangers from other states, all wanting to know how they could help Isabel Morales. Every story she'd ever covered had started with one person's pain. But what made this one different was how quickly that pain was becoming a rallying cry. She opened a new document and began to type, "Who is Isabel Morales? She's your classmate, your neighbor, your daughter's best friend. She's a 19-year-old college student who organized fundraisers to help her community. She's the face of every undocumented student who's ever tried to build a better life. And now she's the one they're trying to erase." Anita's fingers flew across the keys as she built the story piece by piece. The church fundraiser, the arrest, the deportation notice. She added quotes from Professor Stevens, from Lupe, from the kids at the youth center who'd shown up to help. Each voice added a layer of humanity that the official paperwork tried to strip away. She wrote about Isabel's passion for social justice, her academic achievements, her dreams of becoming an immigration lawyer. Ironic, given her current predicament. She described the community that had rallied around her, refusing to let her become another statistic. And then she asked the question that had been burning in her mind all night. If we let this happen to Isabel, who will be next? She ended the article with a call to action. Share this story. Show up. Make them see that Isabel is not alone, and neither are the thousands like her. Together, we can change the ending. She hit publish and watched the post go live. By sunrise, the piece had gone viral. It spread like wildfire through social media. Hashtags trended. Comments poured in, hashtag justice for Isabel, hashtag no one is illegal, hashtag dreamer strong. On the college campus, students woke up to group chats buzzing with screenshots of Anita's article. In the dorms, kids who'd barely spoken to Isabel before found themselves talking about her story in hushed voices that grew louder with each retelling. In the cafeteria, Jasmine sat surrounded by her friends, her phone screen reflecting her tear-stained cheeks. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "She did everything right. Everything." Her friend Marcus leaned in, his voice low but urgent. "We have to do something. We can't just let them take her." Another student, Nina, nodded fiercely. "They can't ignore us if we're too loud to be silenced." Meanwhile, at the detention center, Miguel Estrada arrived at dawn. He'd barely slept, his mind spinning with strategies and legal maneuvers. As he approached the guard station, he could hear Isabel's name being spoken in hushed tones. "The one on the news?" "The student," a guard was saying. Miguel's stomach tightened. This was good and bad. Visibility meant pressure, but it also meant risk. He forced a smile as the guard waved him through, trying to hide the fear that threatened to choke him. Inside, he found Isabel sitting on her cot, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. But her gaze was steady, and when she saw him, she stood. "Did you see it?" she asked. Miguel's eyebrows lifted. "See what?" She held up a borrowed newspaper, her fingers smudged with ink. Anita's article was splashed across the front page, her face staring back at her beneath the headline. "One student, one story. How a community is fighting for Isabel Morales." "I can't believe it," she said, tears filling her eyes. "They're telling my story." Miguel felt his chest tighten. "That's good," he said, nodding. "Very good. The more people know, the harder it is for ICE to make you disappear quietly." She swallowed hard. "But does it help legally?" He hesitated. "Not directly," he admitted. "But it changes the game. Public pressure can make them think twice about rushing this through. And every day we buy is a day we can fight." She nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "Then let's fight." By midday, the college campus had transformed. Students carried handmade signs. "Isabel belongs here. Education, not deportation. We are all dreamers." They gathered outside the administration building, their voices rising in unison. The university president, a gray-haired man named Dr. Whitmore, stepped onto the steps, flanked by security. His face was pinched, his tie askew. Jasmine stepped forward, microphone in hand, her voice trembling with emotion. "Dr. Whitmore, we need you to stand with us. Isabel Morales is one of us. She's a student here, a friend, a sister. We can't just let this happen." The president shifted uncomfortably. "We're aware of Isabel's situation," he said, his voice uncertain. "But this is a matter for federal authorities. Our hands are tied." "No," Jasmine shot back, her voice gaining strength. "Your hands are not tied. You can speak out. You can call ICE and demand her release. You can show us that this university stands for something more than just tuition dollars." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some began to chant, "Say her name! Say her name!" Dr. Whitmore's face paled. He looked at the sea of students, young faces full of determination, and seemed to shrink before them. I will issue a statement," he said finally. "I will contact the authorities and urge them to reconsider." It wasn't a promise, but it was a crack, and the students knew it. Anita watched from the sidelines, her camera capturing every moment. She could feel the electricity in the air, the shift that happens when a story becomes bigger than one person. She texted Miguel, "It's working. She's becoming a symbol." He replied within seconds, "Good. Now we just have to keep the pressure on." Back at the detention center, Isabel sat with her head bowed, listening to the low murmur of the guards' radios. Every now and then, she caught snippets of her own name, the words "media circus," "students protesting," calls from Washington. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time she didn't feel alone. As the sun set on another day, Anita's article continued to spread. More journalists picked up the story. Local TV stations sent reporters to the college. Social media lit up with videos from the protest, hashtags multiplying like sparks. And in the middle of it all stood Isabel's name, a name that refused to be erased. As dawn painted the Georgia sky in hues of pink and gold, the college campus buzzed with a nervous, electric energy. Word of the protest had spread beyond the students' text chains and social media posts. Local news vans had begun to cluster near the main gates. Microphones, cameras, and wide-eyed reporters stood ready to capture every moment, every voice raised in defiance. Inside the dormitory common room, Jasmine sat with a small group of students huddled around a battered wooden table. The air smelled of stale coffee and tension. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but they glistened with a quiet fire. "We need to keep the momentum going," she urged, her voice low but urgent. "If we let this die down now, they'll ship Isabel out and no one will even know." Marcus, always the first to speak his mind, leaned forward, his arms crossed tightly. "But what can we do that's different from yesterday? The protest got on TV, but they're still saying she's scheduled for deportation next week." A hush fell over the group as the weight of that reality settled in. Next week. Just a few days to fight an entire system. Nina, who'd been scrolling through her phone, suddenly looked up. "What if we get other universities involved? Like a solidarity movement? If students at other colleges stand up, it won't just be us anymore. It'll be statewide, maybe even national." Jasmine's heart quickened. "You mean like a student coalition? That could work. If we show them that Isabel's story is every dreamer's story, every immigrant's story." "It's more than that," Marcus interrupted. "It's every student's story. She's one of us. We can't let them turn this into a bureaucratic decision that nobody cares about. We have to make it personal for everyone." A spark ignited in Jasmine's chest. Marcus was right. This couldn't just be about policy. It had to be about people. She stood, her chair scraping against the worn tile floor. "Then let's get to work." Nina's pulse quickened. "Absolutely," she said, barely pausing to breathe. "Let me call you right back." She dialed Jasmine immediately. "We're going on CNN," she whispered. "Tonight. National audience. Isabel's story is going to hit every living room in America." On the other end of the line, Jasmine let out a shaky breath. "Then let's make sure we tell it right." Miguel was at the courthouse when his phone rang. He ducked into a quiet hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "Hello. It's Anita," her voice tense. "They're moving Isabel. Tonight." Miguel's heart thudded. "Where are they taking her?" "Detention center in Louisiana. They're trying to get her out before the rally hits full force." Miguel cursed under his breath. We have to stop them. Legally. They can't move her if there's a pending habeas corpus motion. Anita's voice caught. Can you get one filed by this afternoon? Miguel's brain spun. If I can find a judge willing to hear it on an emergency basis, maybe. But it's going to take everything we've got. Then let's get to work, Anita said. I'll handle the press. You handle the court. Miguel ended the call, hands already reaching for his briefcase. Time was running out. Back at the dorm, Jasmine sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop open, fingers flying. Her screen was split between a Zoom call with coalition leaders and a live feed from the main quad, where students were already gathering with candles and handmade signs. A girl from Spellman's chapter, her hair in tight braids, spoke with conviction. We've reached out to local politicians, immigrant rights groups, even pastors. They're all ready to show up. But we need the university to step up too. Have you heard anything? Jasmine shook her head. Nothing yet from the administration. But we can't wait for them. This is bigger than them now. Another voice cut in, a boy from Georgia Tech. I've got friends at the ACLU. They're interested. If we can get them here by tomorrow, maybe we can file an injunction. Jasmine's pulse raced. Do it, she said. We need every angle covered. She ended the call and turned back to the live feed. The quad was filling with students. Some holding signs, some just standing with arms crossed, eyes determined. She saw Marcus standing near the front, his jaw set, holding a sign that read, "We are all Isabel." A spark of hope flickered in her chest. Miguel burst into the courthouse just before closing. The security guard glanced up, eyebrow raised, but Miguel was already pushing through the metal detector. He found the duty judge's office, knocked once, and pushed the door open. "Your Honor," he said breathlessly, "I need to file an emergency habeas corpus motion to stop a deportation transfer." The judge, a grizzled man with tired eyes, looked up from his paperwork. "Who's the subject?" "Isabel Morales," Miguel said. "She's a college student, with deep ties to the community. Her deportation is being expedited under questionable circumstances." The judge's brow furrowed. "Let me see the paperwork." Miguel handed it over, praying the judge would see the urgency in the trembling hands that delivered it. The judge read quickly, his eyes scanning each line. He let out a long breath. "This is one hell of a case," he murmured. "And one hell of a fight you're picking." Miguel's jaw clenched. "It's the right fight, Your Honor." The judge met his gaze. "I'll sign the motion, but ICE might not comply immediately. You'll need the press on your side." Miguel's heart lifted, if only for a moment. "We've got that covered." Anita was already live on air, her face solemn, her voice calm but steely. "Tonight, the question is not whether Isabel Morales has the right to stay, but whether America has the conscience to let her. Her story is not just her own. It's the story of every student who ever dared to dream." The camera panned to the rally on the quad, candles glowing like stars, signs raised high, voices chanting in the night air. Jasmine stood near the front, microphone in hand, her voice strong. "We're not just here for one girl. We're here for every family ICE has torn apart. We're here because education should be a right, not a privilege for the few. And we're not leaving until Isabel Morales is safe." The crowd roared in agreement. Inside her cell, Isabel closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. She didn't feel alone anymore. The walls were still there, but outside those walls the world was changing. People were standing for her. People were fighting. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Miguel received a call. He fumbled with his phone, heart pounding. "Mr. Santiago." The judge's voice came through, rough but resolute. "Your motion's been granted. ICE is to halt the transfer pending further review. You've bought some time." Miguel's breath caught. "Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you." On campus, Jasmine's phone buzzed. She read the message and turned to Marcus, tears in her eyes. "They can't move her tonight," she whispered. "She's staying here." Marcus threw his arms around her, the two of them trembling with relief and exhaustion. In the chaos of that night, press calls, interviews, student chants, one truth became undeniable. This was more than a fight for one girl. It was a fight for every person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. And it was a fight they were not backing down from. The morning after the emergency stay was granted, the atmosphere on campus was electric. Jasmine felt it the moment she stepped into the quad, her breath catching in her throat at the sight of the makeshift stage that students had built overnight. Handmade banners with messages like, "Justice for Isabel," and "Dreamers belong here," fluttered in the early breeze. A local folk singer was strumming her guitar near the steps of the administration building, her voice trembling with emotion as she sang about hope, resilience, and belonging. Students clapped along, some holding candles left over from the vigil, others clutching books like shields. It wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a movement. Jasmine made her way through the crowd, weaving past a group of art students painting a mural on an old sheet. It depicted Isabel with a halo of bright colors around her head, her eyes fierce and full of fire. Jasmine felt tears prick her own eyes at the sight. Marcus found her near the stage. He was exhausted, his eyes ringed with dark circles, but his smile was unwavering. "Miguel's filing another motion today," he said, voice hushed but urgent. "He wants a formal hearing to challenge the legality of her detention." Jasmine's heart lifted. "That's incredible," she whispered. "But do you think it'll work?" Marcus shrugged. "It's a long shot, but every hour she's not on a bus to Louisiana is a victory." Jasmine nodded, her eyes scanning the growing crowd. "Then let's make sure everyone knows what's happening. If the court fails her, the court of public opinion won't." They turned as a voice crackled through the makeshift speakers. It was Nina, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. "We are here because Isabel Morales deserves to be here. We are here because our community is stronger when every student has the right to learn, to live, to dream. We are here because when one of us is silenced, all of us are silenced. And we refuse to be quiet anymore." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising like a tide. Inside the administration building, President Carter watched the scene unfold from his office window. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, but his eyes were heavy with worry. He'd spent the night on the phone with state officials, donors, and university lawyers, trying to navigate the storm that had descended on his campus. His secretary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, knocked gently before entering. "Sir, the governor's office is asking for an update, and there's a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution waiting in the lobby." Carter rubbed his temples. "Tell them I'm in a meeting," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need a moment to think." He turned back to the window, watching the students chant Isabel's name. He'd never seen them so united before. Students from every background, every club, every corner of the campus. And at the center of it all, Isabel Morales, a name that had gone from a quiet file on his desk to a rallying cry across the state. He sighed deeply. "God help us," he muttered. "This is bigger than any of us imagined." At the courthouse downtown, Miguel stood in a line that snaked around the building. Other attorneys, some holding stacks of manila folders, others glued to their phones, shifted impatiently from foot to foot. But Miguel's focus was unbreakable. He'd spent the night poring over every detail of Isabel's case. Immigration records, student transcripts, even letters of recommendation from professors. Every piece of paper told the same story. Isabel wasn't a threat to anyone. She was a college student, a daughter, a dreamer. Finally, he reached the security checkpoint. The guard, a man with a grizzled beard, eyed his briefcase suspiciously but waved him through. Inside, the courthouse smelled of old wood and bureaucracy, the air thick with the tension of 1,000 lives waiting for judgment. Miguel found the clerk's office and slid his motion through the slot. "I need an emergency hearing," he said, his voice steady. "This is a matter of due process." The clerk raised an eyebrow. "You're not the first lawyer to say that today," she replied dryly. "But we'll get it on the docket." Miguel exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking with exhaustion. Meanwhile, Anita Vasquez was at the center of a media storm. She'd been invited to every morning show, every talk radio slot, every podcast with a microphone. And she'd taken every invitation. Sitting in the green room at WXIA-TV, she reviewed her notes one more time. "Remember," the producer whispered, adjusting her mic. "Keep it concise. They love sound bites." Anita bristled. "This isn't a soundbite," she replied sharply. "This is a young woman's life." The producer blinked, momentarily thrown off. But Anita was already walking toward the studio, head high, shoulders squared. The lights were blinding, the cameras unforgiving. But she didn't flinch. "Welcome, Anita," the anchor said, his smile practiced. "You've been following the Isabel Morales case closely. Can you tell us why this matters so much to people across the country?" Anita leaned forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "Because this isn't just Isabel's story," she said. "This is the story of every family who's ever felt the ground shift beneath them because of a piece of paper. This is about who gets to call this country home. And it's about whether we stand up for each other when the system tries to tear us apart." The anchor nodded, visibly moved. "And what do you want viewers to take away from this?" Anita looked directly into the camera, her eyes fierce. "I want them to remember that Isabel is still here because people cared enough to raise their voices. And I want them to know that if we don't keep fighting, the system will silence her, and every student like her, forever." On campus, Jasmine stood on the steps of the administration building, a bullhorn in hand. "We are not going to let this end in the shadows," she shouted, her voice carrying across the crowd. "We will not let them move Isabel without a fight." The students roared their approval. Behind her, Marcus held up his phone. "Jazz," he whispered, "CNN wants to go live. They want to talk to you. Right now." Jasmine blinked, the weight of the moment hitting her like a wave. She glanced out at the sea of faces. Some hopeful, some scared, all determined. "Then let's do it," she said, taking the phone. The reporter's voice crackled in her ear. "Jasmine, can you tell us what's happening on the ground?" She swallowed, drawing in a breath. "We're standing for Isabel Morales," she said. "We're standing for every student who's ever been told they don't belong. And we're not going to stop until she's safe." In her cell, Isabel felt the vibrations of the world beyond the concrete walls. A guard had smuggled in a newspaper, and on the front page was a photo of the rally. Students holding candles, their faces fierce. She traced the headline with trembling fingers. "Dreamer or criminal? The fight for Isabel Morales." She closed her eyes and whispered, "I am not alone." As dusk settled over the campus, Marcus joined Jasmine at the front of the quad. The air was thick with the scent of candles and the murmur of voices. "Do you think it'll be enough?" he asked, his voice raw. Jasmine turned to him, her eyes fierce. "It has to be." Marcus nodded, determination burning in his gaze. "Then let's make sure they hear us." They joined hands, standing at the edge of the stage as the crowd quieted. "This is our story," Jasmine called out, her voice ringing clear. "This is our fight. And we're not backing down." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices rising like a wave. The morning of the hearing dawned with a heavy, silver-gray sky that seemed to press down on the city. Rain clung to the edges of windows like tears that refused to fall. Jasmine's heart thundered in her chest as she watched the clouds gather, a prelude to a storm she could feel in her bones. She knew today would either mark the beginning of hope or the deepening of despair for Isabel Morales. At the courthouse, a long line snaked around the block. Students, professors, neighbors, strangers who had seen Isabel's face on social media. Some clutched candles, others carried homemade signs. The air crackled with tension, the kind that made every breath feel urgent. Jasmine pushed her way through the crowd, her stomach tight with nerves. Marcus was already there, his suit jacket wrinkled from the hours he'd spent preparing. "You made it," he said, his voice hoarse. "Of course I made it," she replied, trying to steady her breathing. "I couldn't be anywhere else." Inside the courthouse, the old wooden benches were packed. The walls, lined with plaques and faded photos of judges long retired, seemed to watch with silent judgment. At the front, the judge's bench loomed, a relic of authority that now felt like a fortress. Isabel was led into the courtroom, her wrists cuffed in front of her. She wore a simple white blouse and navy slacks, borrowed from the detention center's makeshift visitor's closet, a detail that made Jasmine's chest ache. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight braid, but no matter how composed she tried to look, Jasmine could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Miguel stood to greet her, his face solemn but determined. He leaned close, whispering something that made Isabel nod, her expression hardening. She was ready, or at least, as ready as anyone could be when their entire future hinged on the words of strangers. The judge entered, a tall man with graying hair and a reputation for procedural precision. He glanced over the courtroom, his eyes momentarily resting on the crowd of students and activists before settling on Isabel. His gavel came down with a sharp crack that silenced even the whispers. This court will now hear the motion to challenge the detention of Isabel Morales, he intoned, his voice like granite. Counselor, you may proceed. Miguel rose, his hands trembling slightly as he gathered his papers. He started with her record, grades that glowed, letters of recommendation that spoke of leadership, volunteer hours that stretched beyond the hours in a day. Your Honor, he said, his voice clear. Isabel Morales is not a threat. She is a student, a role model, a dreamer. Detaining her is not only unjust, it is unconscionable. He laid out the facts of her arrest. How she was picked up not on the streets but at a community workshop, teaching younger students about civil rights. How the arresting officer had ignored her student ID, her paperwork, her humanity. The room was silent but charged, each detail landing like a blow. When the prosecution stood, their words felt cold and clinical. Your Honor, regardless of personal sentiment, Ms. Morales is undocumented. She is subject to removal proceedings. The arrest was within legal bounds. Miguel shot to his feet, his voice raw. Legal bounds? Your Honor, the Constitution guarantees due process. This was not a routine detainment. It was targeted, it was selective, and it was executed with the clear intent to silence a student activist who had become too visible for comfort. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Isabel's head bowed, her hands clenched. The judge's gaze was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. Mr. Ortiz, he said to the prosecutor, did the arresting officer know Isabel's identity at the time of her detainment? The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. The officer claims she did not identify herself immediately. Miguel's voice cut through. She did, Your Honor. She presented her student ID. It was disregarded. The judge turned to Isabel. Ms. Morales, is this true? She raised her head, her voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. I told the officer my name, my status as a student, and that I was teaching a workshop that day. He didn't care. A hush fell over the room. The judge leaned back, his fingers steepled. This court takes these allegations seriously, he said. We will recess for 30 minutes to review the submitted evidence and the arrest report. As the gavel struck, the courtroom exploded in noise. Whispers, gasps, the shuffling of feet. Jasmine bolted from her seat, reaching Isabel's side as the guards led her toward a holding room. You were incredible, she whispered fiercely. Don't let them break you. Isabel managed a weak smile. I won't, she replied. No matter what happens. Miguel pulled Jasmine aside. We have a shot, he said, his eyes blazing. If the judge sees the inconsistencies in the arrest report, if he sees the bias, he might just rule in our favor. Jasmine's heart pounded. And if he doesn't? Miguel didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew what that meant. Outside, the crowd had grown even larger. News crews hovered like vultures, their cameras pointed at the steps. Anita Vasquez stood at the front, her microphone clutched like a weapon. This is more than a hearing, she said to the camera. This is a fight for every undocumented student who dares to dream. And today we find out whose side the justice system is really on. Her words rippled through the crowd, their energy shifting from nervous anticipation to fiery determination. Jasmine turned to Marcus, who was scanning social media updates. "They're saying hashtag Justice for Isabel is trending nationally," he said, awe in his voice. Jasmine's chest tightened. "Then let's make sure the judge knows the world is watching." The 30 minutes stretched like hours. Every tick of the courtroom clock was a drumbeat in Jasmine's chest. Finally, the judge returned, his face unreadable. "After reviewing the evidence," he began, his voice grave, "this court finds that the circumstances of Ms. Morales' arrest are indeed troubling. The disregard for her student status, the dismissal of her ID, and the apparent targeting of a known activist all suggest a violation of due process." Gasps, cheers, a single sob that broke through the tension. "Therefore," the judge continued, his voice steady, "this court grants the motion to release Ms. Morales from detention pending further proceedings. She is to remain in the community under supervision." The gavel fell like a thunderclap. The courtroom erupted in cheers, tears streaming down faces, hands clutching at each other in relief. Jasmine turned, her arms wrapping around Marcus, their laughter mixing with sobs. Miguel stood frozen for a moment, then let out a ragged breath, a smile breaking across his face. Isabel's eyes filled with tears as the guard uncuffed her. Jasmine reached her, pulling her into a fierce hug. "You're free," she whispered. "You're free, for now." But even in the joy of that moment, Jasmine knew the fight wasn't over. The system that had nearly erased Isabel wouldn't stop with one ruling. They would be back with more paperwork, more procedures, more ways to wear them down. As Isabel stepped out into the afternoon sun, the crowd waiting on the courthouse steps erupted in cheers. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters shouted questions. But Isabel didn't speak. She just raised her hand, a single fist in the air, her eyes fierce. This wasn't the end of her story. This was the beginning of a movement. The courthouse steps felt like a stage now. A stage Isabel hadn't chosen, but one she couldn't walk away from either. As the cheers of the crowd washed over her, she scanned the faces, searching for something to anchor her. Jasmine was there, her face alight with pride and determination. Marcus too, standing close by, his phone in hand, already fielding calls from reporters. Even Miguel, who'd fought so hard for this victory, looked like he was struggling to believe it was real. But reality settled on Isabel like a weight she couldn't shake. She was free, for now. And for now felt like a thread about to snap. The victory was incomplete, and every step felt fragile. Anita Vasquez pushed through the crowd, her microphone still in hand. She wasn't shouting questions now, her voice was low, urgent. "Isabel, do you have a message for the millions of undocumented students who are watching this right now?" Isabel drew a breath, her chest tight. The crowd quieted, leaning in. She remembered all the nights spent worrying about deportation. The nights she lay awake thinking about her mother working overtime at the diner, about her brother with his science fair trophies gathering dust because nobody had time to celebrate. She thought about every kid who'd been told to keep their head down, to blend in, to never make a fuss. She looked Anita square in the eye. Tell them to stay strong, to fight, to believe that their dreams matter. Because we're not invisible, and we're not going away. A cheer rose, but Isabel barely heard it. The adrenaline was fading, and exhaustion was creeping in. She felt Jasmine's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "You did it," Jasmine whispered. "You made them listen." "I made them listen for today," Isabel said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were rimmed red. "Tomorrow they'll come at me again. And not just me. Every kid who looks like me, who sounds like me." Jasmine nodded, her own eyes fierce. "Then we'll be ready." Miguel approached, his tie askew, papers clutched in one hand. "I've got the paperwork started to keep you here while we prepare for the next phase," he said. "But it's going to be a fight. ICE is already challenging the ruling. We're going to need every ounce of support we can get." "We'll get it," Jasmine said quickly. "We've got community organizations lined up. The media's paying attention now. They can't sweep this under the rug anymore." Marcus joined them, his face grim. "Social media is on fire. Hashtag Justice for Isabel is trending everywhere. Celebrities are tweeting. Journalists are calling. But that means the other side is paying attention too. Isabel shivered, thinking of the comments she'd already seen online. Some hateful, some dismissive, some threatening. I can handle the trolls, she muttered. It's not just trolls, Marcus warned. Politicians. People who'd love to make you a symbol for everything they want to tear down. We've got to be careful. Jasmine squeezed Isabel's shoulder. We're not going to let them turn you into their pawn. You're going to be the voice they can't silence. Isabel's breath caught. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I just wanted to study, to help my community, to have a chance. Miguel's voice softened. I know, Mija, but you've become more than just a student now. You're a symbol of what's at stake. And I know that's not fair. But we're going to use that to make them see what they're doing. Isabel's eyes glistened. Then let's make them see. A hush fell over the group as a man in a dark suit approached, a representative from ICE, flanked by 2 agents. The crowd shifted uneasily, some shouting, some booing. Isabel's stomach lurched. Ms. Morales? The man said stiffly, his voice cold and rehearsed. We are required to inform you that while the court has granted your release pending further proceedings, you are still subject to removal at any time. You are to report to the ICE office tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for a status check. Failure to comply may result in immediate detention. Miguel stepped forward, his jaw tight. She'll comply, but you'll be hearing from our legal team. The agent didn't flinch. We'll be expecting her. As they turned to leave, the crowd erupted. Shame on you, someone shouted. She's a student, not a criminal. But the agents moved on, faces blank, uniforms stiff with authority. Isabel exhaled shakily. I'm so tired, she whispered. Jasmine pulled her close. You're not alone. Not anymore. The rest of the day blurred. A press conference outside the courthouse, interviews with local reporters, a vigil planned for the next evening. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a soft glow that belied the tension that simmered beneath. At Marcus's suggestion, they retreated to a safe house, a small apartment loaned by a local activist group. Isabel collapsed on the couch, tears finally breaking free. Jasmine knelt beside her, rubbing slow circles on her back. You were amazing today, she said softly. You stood up for everyone who can't stand up for themselves. Isabel shook her head. I'm not strong enough for this. You are, Jasmine insisted. But you don't have to do it alone. Miguel paced the room, phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with legal aid groups. Marcus typed furiously, crafting a statement for the press. Outside the window, the city glowed with neon signs and the occasional flash of police lights. Tomorrow's going to be harder, Marcus said, glancing up. ICE is going to push back. They'll use every trick in the book. Jasmine's eyes met Isabel's. Then we push harder. Isabel straightened, wiping her tears. Then we fight, she said. For me. For every kid they think they can erase. A knock at the door startled them all. Miguel opened it cautiously, revealing Anita Vasquez, her microphone tucked into her bag. I know it's late, she said, her eyes serious. But I wanted to make sure you knew. The governor's office just issued a statement. They're reviewing the case. They said they're concerned about the integrity of the process. Marcus's eyes widened. That's huge. If they get involved. It could go either way, Miguel warned. Political pressure can make them help or make them scapegoat her even faster. Anita nodded. That's why I'm here. We have a platform, Isabel. If you're willing, we can make this bigger than they ever imagined. Isabel felt her heart pound. Bigger than she ever imagined. But maybe that was what it would take. She stood, her voice trembling but strong. I'm in. Anita smiled. Then let's get to work. As the night deepened, the city hummed with possibility and danger. Isabel knew she was just one voice in a sea of injustice. But tonight, she felt that voice grow louder. And outside the window, a new storm gathered in the darkness. One that might finally sweep away the old shadows. Morning came with a sense of urgency. The sun rose, casting a soft glow across the city, but its light felt different today, like a promise that things were about to change. Inside the safe house, Isabel Morales sat at the edge of the couch, staring at the clock. 7:15 a.m. In 45 minutes, she would walk into the ICE office, a place she'd only heard about in hushed, fearful whispers. Jasmine hovered nearby, her eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. She tried to talk Isabel out of going, tried to convince her to stay hidden, to disappear into the folds of the underground networks that protected so many. But Isabel had shaken her head. "If I run," she'd said, her voice low but unshakable, "they win." Miguel sat at the small dining table, stacks of paperwork spread around him. His phone buzzed nonstop, calls from reporters, lawyers, community organizers. He looked up, catching Isabel's gaze. "We have every legal argument ready," he said. "I'll be by your side every step of the way." Isabel nodded, her fingers tracing the worn fabric of her jeans. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the city felt alive. News vans lined the block. Protesters held handmade signs, some demanding justice, others simply carrying Isabel's name in bold letters. The hashtag Justice for Isabel had become a rallying cry that no one had expected but everyone had needed. At 7:45 a.m., Isabel stood and smoothed her blouse. Jasmine took her hand. "Whatever happens in there," she said fiercely, "you are not alone." Isabel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I know," she whispered. "I'm ready." They made their way to the ICE building, each step heavy with the weight of possibility. Miguel walked beside her, his briefcase a shield against the bureaucracy waiting inside. Reporters swarmed them, microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Isabel, how do you feel today? Do you believe justice will be served? What do you want to say to undocumented students watching right now?" Isabel paused, meeting the sea of cameras with a steady gaze. "I want them to know they matter," she said, her voice clear, "that their dreams are worth fighting for, and that no matter how dark it seems, we can stand together and be heard." A cheer rose from the crowd. Inside the building, the atmosphere shifted. Gone was the chaotic energy of the street. Here, the halls smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Every corner felt designed to erase the humanity of those who walked them. They entered the waiting area, a gray room with metal chairs bolted to the floor. Isabel sat, her hands folded in her lap. Miguel stood beside her, the legal documents trembling in his hands. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a door creaked open, and a uniformed officer called her name. Isabel Morales. She stood, her heart hammering. The officer led them to a small, windowless room. A single desk separated Isabel from the ICE agent on the other side. He was older than she'd expected, gray hair, deep lines etched into his face, but his eyes were unreadable. "Ms. Morales," he began, his tone flat, "we have reviewed the case files, the judge's ruling, and the evidence presented. This is highly irregular." Miguel leaned forward. "It's irregular because the arrest was unjust. She was targeted at a community workshop while teaching students. She is a student herself with no criminal record. She deserves to stay." The agent sighed, leafing through the file. "I've never seen a case with this much public interest," he muttered. The phones haven't stopped ringing. Calls from local politicians. Calls from DC. He closed the folder and looked up, his eyes finally meeting Isabel's. "Ms. Morales, I'm not going to lie to you. Normally, we'd proceed with removal. But given the ruling and the overwhelming public support, I'm recommending that your deportation be suspended." Isabel's breath caught. The agent continued, "You will be released today, and your case will be reopened with full due process. You'll have the chance to apply for relief from removal." Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks. Jasmine gripped her hand so tightly she thought it might break. Miguel let out a shuddering breath. "Thank you," he whispered. The agent's face softened for just a moment. "Good luck, Ms. Morales," he said. "Make it count." Outside, the sun was shining, and the crowd erupted when they saw Isabel emerge. Reporters pressed forward, their voices blending into a single roar of questions. Isabel raised her hand, her voice strong. "I'm not going anywhere," she declared. "Not today. Not tomorrow. I will fight for every student, every family, every dreamer who refuses to be silenced." The cheer that followed felt like thunder. Jasmine was at her side, eyes bright with pride. Miguel smiled, his hands trembling from the adrenaline. As the crowd swelled around her, Isabel knew the fight wasn't over, but it was no longer hers to fight alone. The next days were a blur of interviews, meetings, and calls from lawmakers wanting to be on the right side of history. Isabel's case sparked a renewed push for immigration reform. Her story splashed across every screen. Her voice, once nearly silenced, now echoed in every corner of the country. At a rally a week later, standing before a crowd of thousands, Isabel spoke the words she'd once been too afraid to say. "This is our home," she said. "This is our fight. And together we will win." And in that moment, justice felt real. What did you think of Isabel's journey? Do you believe her story can inspire change? Let's talk in the comments. Share your thoughts, experiences, and any questions you have. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with your friends. Together, let's keep these conversations alive. Stay tuned for more powerful stories that remind us why every voice matters.